going to protect himself at the Tulsa rally, and whatever protections he has, will those also be made available to the crowd?
Well, the president and the vice president, two most important people in our government and our nation, Joe, they are tested routinely, as are those of us who are around them routinely. So, as you know, the campaign, who is in charge of the rallies, made an announcement. They'll be providing masks, hand sanitizer, temperature checks for everyone who enters. In addition to that, there are always, I think, other checks that happen. You know, people go through magnometers, make sure there are no dangerous. That's a different kind of check. Make sure nobody's bringing anything dangerous. But we want to protect the safety and well-being of everyone. And the president is routinely tested, though.
And just on Bolton, just one quick question about Bolton. The pleading that was filed by the government,
By the Department of Justice,
right,
yes.
says that the initial person who reviewed the book found no information that was sensitive or inappropriate and that should not be published. How much of
I'm
this
sorry, was
book-
that person with the publisher or the NSC?
No,
or
no, this was NSC.
Okay, got it.
So how much of this lawsuit really is about the issue of sensitive government information versus the need to protect the president from embarrassment during a political
Yeah, so it's about protecting national security secrets. I would say it's about protecting the country. And Attorney General Barr made clear in an open press event, Zeke was there, maybe some others of you were there, 2 short days ago. I sat right next to him as he answered that question and said, look, we have a review process. It's the department's position the review process has not been completed thoroughly and completed. And he said separately, you know, it's kind of remarkable to have a book be published while people are still in office. Usually it's later on that the colleagues you worked with and the sensitive matters you worked on are still in play. So I'm not part of that review process. I'm just repeating what the Attorney General said. One thing I will tell you is the book is called Room Where It Happened. So the ambassador is projecting to everybody in fairly bright lights that he was in the Oval Office, he was in the Situation Room, he was meeting with foreign leaders and the president in SCIFs and in other sensitive areas, being entrusted with the nation's security information, intelligence briefings every day, etc. One thing I would also just say to all of you, as politely as I possibly can, of course, is it is absolutely precious and adorable how all pro John Bolton you all are now. It's really cute. When I get a little spare time in my personal capacity, of course, I'll pull up what you said about him in the past, because that's always a charmer. But I worked with Ambassador Bolton here. I've known him for a very long time, and I would just think that it's very important to the nation's security, not even the president himself, but to the presidency and the nation's security, make sure that review processes have been completed. One thing I'll tell you, all these books are riddled with factual errors, and I know you're all so big sticklers for facts first, right, Joe? Hashtag facts first. And I mean, I just saw, because somebody sent me the 2 pages, I certainly wouldn't buy it or read it, but I saw a pretty unimpressive, underwhelming, unremarkable book by a reporter that's out that talks about a 2016 meeting we had 3 campaign officials had at ABC News, and we'd been at CNN earlier that day, has the wrong person there. There were 3 of us there, has the wrong 3rd person. It says Brad Parscale was there, and it was Jason Miller. So I think if you're wrong about small things, you're wrong about big things. And I really do worry that there's very little fact-checking in these books. I've seen ones that have been completely wrong. I've seen quotes attributed to somebody when it was obviously somebody else in that private meeting who said it. Not that the private meeting should have been revealed in any circumstance without permission. But that's a concern too, which is what are the fact-checking, what are the rigors? And again, I know that you're all for fact-checking, so I hope you'll apply that to all types of work. It's not about just the Bolton book. I mean all types of work, because you haven't in the past. There have been many errors in all these books that as long as they're scintillating, as long as they don't get the story, they get the president and the people around him, we just go with it. We go with it. That's Simon & Schuster's problem. No, it's your problem independently. You need to make sure that those facts are right also.
Kellyanne, you know Iowa polling really, really well. What are your thoughts about that latest Des Moines Register Iowa poll that says the president is within 1 point of Joe Biden? What does that mean for the president? Really?
I think the president will win Iowa again, and Joni Ernst will win, and Kim Reynolds is doing a great job as the governor there. I do remember Iowa polling in the primaries last time. They were a disaster. It was I'm sorry to tell you, but it was a Bloomberg poll. You guys had hired a quote prominent pollster there, and the poll was way wrong about the caucus results there. As you may recall, you had a big fancy expensive cocktail party to release it, And I realized Michael Bloomberg then went on to spend $1 billion on other things like a failed presidential run. But at the time, it was to release a poll that ended up being wrong. So here's what I think about polls generally. I think and I've said this for years because I was a pollster, I don't know a billion things about a billion things, but I know polling. And I think we should always look to see who's being polled. So this is not about that poll. If it's adults, even if it's registered voters, likely voters, I always said for decades as a pollster, Zeke, you're really going to want this one. Is that the worst way to find out if somebody's a likely voter is to ask them, are you likely to vote? Yes, and I pay my taxes, and I go to church every Wednesday and Sunday. I do sit-ups every morning. Vote, I'll be there. I think you have to make people feel comfortable to tell you that they either haven't voted or why they feel more motivated this year or less motivated this year, and be very honest about that with people. We did it for decades. Secondly, what is the question here? There's a science part and then there's the art part. What are the questions? So I think what you're going to see in many of these swing states is what we saw in 2016, which is Biden and Trump in relatively close proximity to each other, under 50% in most of these swing states. And when the president asked me to be his campaign manager on August 12th, 2016, it's just the two of us, I talked about those polls. I talked about how there were a number of swing states that we can go into at that time where three important parts. Number one, Obama, Biden had carried them twice with over 50% of the vote. Number two, there was no poll that had Hillary above 50% staying there for a sustained amount of time in those states. And number three, those states had elected a Republican statewide during President Obama's tenure of the Obama-Biden years. So it's not that they're allergic to Republican leadership. In fact, they had governors and or senators who were Republican, other statewide officials. So that's important to look at too, because I think these races, the main thing that I see is that both of them are under 50% in most of these states. We never did a single national poll when I was campaign manager. I looked at it as a colossal waste of money for the reasons we're talking about. It gives outsized importance to the more populous states, and it gives far less importance to the less populous states, and it doesn't have a large enough sample size in those 10, 11, 12 swing states that I think you'll all be looking at and traveling to with a clip.
Kellyanne, can you speak to the president's meeting yesterday with the families of those who have been killed by police officers? Did it shift the president's thinking in any way on this issue?
Well, the president is always molded by the people he meets, and that's why he ran for president, is president. The forgotten man, forgotten woman, and I would put many of those families in those categories because they feel like they have not gotten the voice and the visibility that they and their loved ones deserve. Their loved ones are victims of senseless tragedies, and I'm so happy they came here. And even for those who decided not to come here, that they always have an open door here. Open phone line, open door. They're welcome here anytime. And I will just echo the words of my colleague Ron Smith, who was in the meeting, and Senator Tim Scott. Senator Tim Scott said he saw a president compassion, listening, really moved, turned to the Attorney General at some point and said, take a look at that, change that, or make that happen, I think were the words. You can go back and look at the public reporting. But I've seen that many times. We had the Parkland families here. I saw something very similar. Many times I've seen it privately and then in public events as well. I saw it on the campaign and then taking the drug crisis into this White House, where he would be stopped by people and say, please, I lost my sister. We didn't even know that she was using. Please, this is going all over the state of New Hampshire. It's going all over here in West Virginia. You have to do something. And indeed, he's done something. So I think that the president took it very far yesterday in an executive order, as far as an executive can. Now it goes to the legislature. I'm very heartened by what I see in fairly quick action for a Congress that hasn't acted very speedily and very collaboratively, except for, say, the CARES Act of recent time. So I think the Senate Republicans coming out with a 100-page bill shows you the seriousness and the earnestness with which they are approaching the topic of police reform. But I think what the president did yesterday was very different because he brought together communities, families, and then separately the law enforcement folks themselves. You can't just do one or the other, and I think that's been the problem. That's been the half-baked nature of this in the past. I was just reading an article from early July 2015, so the article's almost 5 years old, and the headline says, for President Obama, police reform is a work in progress. So I think now we see more work and a lot more progress.
Apologies if you guys talked about this before I got here. Is there any more reconsideration of going on Saturday to the rallies, given the concerns being expressed by
Well, the president's campaign, I read, has taken precautions by giving everybody a mask, hand sanitizer, thermometer checks. People are going to go if they feel comfortable going. So we always tell people, here is the guidance. Feel comfortable, don't feel comfortable. We also know that people don't want to be locked down forever. We see them peacefully protesting. We see folks doing many things. So please don't be hypocritical about who you think has the right to go out there without a mask or with a mask and who shouldn't. The CDC guidelines are in place. They make very clear how people should be protecting themselves and those around them. And at the same time,
CDC guidelines.
pardon?
One of the biggest recommendations of the CDC, applying equally to everybody, admittedly, is not together in big crowds. That's one of the bedrock indoors principles, indoors especially. But that's one of the bedrock principles. And one of the things that the officials have long said is that they hope that wearing masks doesn't give people the false sense of security, that they can abandon distancing.
Right, and hand washing, and yes,
Right.
correct.
So just putting a mask on doesn't mean that suddenly you're invincible.
Right, nobody has said that.
Crowd into.
Nobody has said that.
So anyway, I guess no consideration, it sounds like, though, of not holding it or holding it just out.
I haven't heard the campaign say anything differently. But I know the president's very excited to get back on the road and connect directly with people. I'm sure there are those who will never want him to do that again because obviously that's the gold standard in his stock and trade for him and other people. I mean, Terry McAuliffe, who's a very smart person, said, the former governor of Virginia and longtime Clinton confidant, both Clintons, I think, he said, and former DNC chair said, we'd like Biden to be in his bunker in his basement as long as we possibly can. And yet other people in Zoom nodding their head like, yes, please keep him there. That's no way to run a democracy. And there will be a campaign, there will be debates, there will be rallies, there will be conventions, and the country deserves that. They deserve to see a stark choice. I think there's an incredibly stark choice between President Trump yesterday in the Rose Garden and before that in a private setting with no photos, no open press event. I hope you respect that for the family's sake, meeting with the families of lost loved ones. And to contrast that to Joe Biden in the well of the United States Senate in 1993 saying these are predators among us who must remain in jail. He said, quote, I don't care what kind of tough childhood, I don't care what made them a sociopath, I don't care which made them. It is so chilling for me to watch a United States Senator who then was also chairman of the Judiciary Committee at some point, maybe then, was also vice president for 8 years in this building and now wants to be president of the United States, to look upon people that way. And you are duty bound, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure your viewers and your readers watch that, because that is a tremendous contrast from what I saw yesterday. We're done talking, it's time for action. Done listening, it's time for acting. And to have the Democratic nominee say that people are predators, to talk, go look at it. It's like a 3.5 minute clip. The K File put it out last March 9th, 2019. I haven't seen a lot of excitement at CNN since then. Now that he's a nominee, I suppose you were pushing for other people then. They fell short. The woke joke, party nominated Joe Biden for whatever reason. That's their problem. But people should know how he feels about folks who, under this president, 13,000 or so, I was just told by my colleague Ron Smith, we have about 13,000 people now out of prison. And COVID-19 also accelerated that, in that we are able to put many of them in home confinement. Nonviolent offenders are in home confinement or early release. And contrast that to Joe Biden and the way he looks at people for whom we've given a second chance. I think many are, and I think the access that many of us have to information, those of us who have top secret clearances, obviously are classified. And well, I think many things are confidential. And look, if you're asking about in the context of a book, what I will tell you is I think that many things are confidential. And for example, we got here 9 or 10 days in, 2 conversations that the president had with heads of state at the time, Australia and Mexico, I believe. Different heads of state now, but at the time they were the heads of state there. Those conversations leaked. Very few people had access to those conversations, and probably came from the NSC.
What's the difference between confidential and classified, so I understand?
Oh, well, we all learned about that through the Hillary Clinton emails. If you need a refresher, I'd be happy to remind you, because I became an expert on it. She didn't know the difference, even though she had been Secretary of State. You and I weren't. First Lady for 8 years, United States Senator, somehow had no idea.
Okay.
Yale law graduate.
All good, and she's not president. So the president said that...
Partly because of that reason, but go on.
The president said that any conversation he has is classified.
He said, I think any conversation I have is classified. I'd have to ask. I think he means probably with his national security advisor in the Situation Room, in the Oval Office, in an intelligence briefing, with foreign leaders. I think he's thinking about, the president is probably thinking about particular specific conversations that were had with foreign leaders, where also in preparation for those meetings, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, you have access to classified information. So, we go into the Situation Room for the task force meeting and our phones are surrendered. And that, let alone anything else that is, top secret. So I just feel like the nation's security and all the folks who are looking at our nation to try to figure out how to harm us or harm our people, we owe it to make sure that the proper procedures were in place. Simon & Schuster and Ambassador Bolton believe they've complied. The Department of Justice believes they haven't complied. That's, I think, why you now have a lawsuit. I've not been part of that compliance or review process. I certainly have known Ambassador Bolton for a long time. I served alongside of him here. I will just go back and tell you, many of these books are fact challenged. I'm not sure why there are not the same standards for books that will live forever, as opposed to like a report you're about to file or an article you're about to do. I mean,
somebody can write a book full of lies and you can't stop that.
We've seen that.
So you're saying that would be okay, but this issue is not.
I did not say that would be okay. I did not say that would be okay at all. I'm making the point.
The complaint doesn't say you can't do lies. The complaint says you can't do classified.
Pete, I'm talking about two different things. I'm addressing your questions about the Department of Justice lawsuit against Ambassador Bolton. And then I'm saying, and separately, I'm saying we've seen book after book where even the people in the room, it was that somebody's name was wrong. The people in the room was wrong. It had the wrong year. That's just lazy. And if this is just about, trying to get the president and not get the story, then we have to think about that. We already have Twitter for that. We already have, where everybody's their own editor, and it's the Wild Wild West, and nothing is true until then you give it the platform of a New York Times or CNN or NBC for whatever odd reason. But we have books that live forever that are going to print. I haven't seen the Bolton book, so I don't know about that one, but I'm telling you, I just read one by one of your colleagues where there were 3 of us from the Trump campaign. He's got the wrong person there. He's saying, it's just a little mistake. Why? Why is it a mistake? But the content of the conversation was also stupid and wrong. But the people were wrong. And if we ever did that, it would live forever. We put the semicolon in the wrong place around here, and you have it live forever. So let's think about that, and let's all be fair to each other as we're unpacking this.
Excuse me, Kellyanne, just real quick. The president met with families yesterday, the victims' families, and Albert's family. Will he continue, and it was a very emotional sort of situation.
For him too.
Will he continue to directly speak with them as we move forward on this big public discourse about racism and systemic racism in this country? Will he continue to speak with them directly?
The president will continue to speak with many different individuals across this country. Absolutely. If those families would continue to be part of the conversation. I will tell you my own experience as a non-medical professional is that people deal with grief and loss very differently. Some people want to become advocates and some people never want to say a public word about it. So we will always respect that and leave that to the individuals to decide what their comfort level is. But they always have an ear here and an open door here. And that goes for the folks who didn't come. That goes for folks in the future who unfortunately will have lost loved ones to any number of tragedies. We always have, and the president talks to people like that. The cameras were off yesterday, but when you don't know about it either, we get many folks, talking to you like that. Maybe a pull aside backstage before a rally, maybe a private phone call that's brokered, that's off of his schedule, and that's what presidents do, and they should do it. And this president really takes on that part of his job with great vigor.
Do you think you might meet with George Floyd's family at some point?
It's possible. And I happened to be in the room when he spoke with George Floyd's brother. And I won't ever talk about that conversation, but I happened to be there. So, and I'm very happy that call happened. And I've seen Mr. Floyd, the decedent's brother, the murder victim's brother, testify since then and speak before then. And I'm listening to every word he has to say, and I think we all should. Thank you.